Welcome to Sacred Significance, the podcast that's all about the transformative power of self-realization. Now, if you've been hanging out with me, you know we've been doing our due diligence on the habit of being you. We've talked a lot about that conditioning, how that happens. We've gone into what actually constitutes a self-image, and we talked last episode quite a bit about self-image, how it feeds into our self-esteem, how our self-esteem feeds into self-knowledge. So today, we're going to take this a little bit deeper and see if we can extract a few more truths out of this vital conversation about this, what I call a three-legged stool, in which most, if not all of our decisions are derived from the foundation of how we see ourselves. So today's title is called A Distorted Self-Image. Let's talk about how we got there and how we begin to move into something far more sacred that is undeniably valuable and worthy of significance. Okay, so here we go. Where we've been is we were talking in depth about your self-image, the self-knowledge you hold of yourself, and this idea of self-esteem, which we know as a self-appraisal, a way to assign a sense of value. So I want to pick that up and I want to take us a little bit deeper, but I want to just start with, I want you to really consider part of your homework. If you did the homework, you were supposed to see if you could connect the dots between how your self-knowledge has informed your self-image. Right? You were supposed to sit and kind of muse and think about how what you know about yourself is shaping how you see yourself. Good, bad, indifferent, anything in between, it doesn't matter. I want you to see and realize the connection. Right? That's the lesson. The lesson is that you realize, wow, there's a powerful relationship between my self-knowledge and my self-image. Right? Now, if that's true, and it is true, then what I know of myself can change how I see myself. You see where I'm going? What I know of myself can alter how I see myself. Now, here's the second thing you had to do. You had to look at how you see yourself, and you had to see the direct impact it has on how you self-appraise. We call that self-esteem. So you had to then stop and see, wow, okay, so now my self-image has some level of tremendous impact to how I derive my sense of self-value, whether or not I find myself worthy, how I self-assess my worth and my value system, and ultimately what I'll accept, won't accept. Those kind of things hang in the balance around self-esteem. When our self-esteem is low, we kind of accept a little bit of anything. We may take more than we have to, and things of that nature, right? So your homework was to connect valuable links between your knowledge and your self-image, and you were also supposed to look at how your self-image affects your sense of self-worth, your sense of self-value. If you did that, and I'm sure you did because you're an incredible student, then today we're going to go a little deeper into how these really create this, this foundation for all behavior. Most people who don't like maybe who they are or who they've presented themselves as, and they don't like their behaviors, and there's things they can't seem to corral about themselves or bring into some level of governance and subjection, it's because you cannot change the outside until you alter the blueprint, right? You can't fix behavior until you understand the behavior stems from a self-idea, a self-concept, a self-image. So you can't fix the external. You can't fix output unless you target input, right? So that's why we're going into a lot of detail on this work around self-identity, because it is the blueprint from which all construct in your life arises, okay? So we were talking a lot about these three, their influence. So the biggest thing that you know, just from how we started today's episode, is what I know about myself has a direct bearing on how I see myself. And then how I see myself has a very direct influence and significant impact on how I self-appraise, how I feel about myself, how much value I assign to myself. So what that should say then is my self-knowledge is key. What I know of myself, what I've come to realize about myself, what I believe I am, who I believe I am, is the cornerstone of how I'm going to see myself and the cornerstone of how I'm going to self-appraise, feel about myself, right? Now, keep in mind, we operate out of this in a nanosecond. We operate out of it. Like if you've ever been in a store and maybe there's certain things you just won't look at because the value that you maybe assign to yourself won't let you look at certain things or buy certain things, or maybe, no, I won't do that. Or maybe you're one of those people who maybe give everybody else something, but you yourself won't give anything to yourself, right? Because the self-appraisal, you wouldn't think it's that. You would just think I'm really generous to everybody else. You wouldn't think that maybe there's something in your self-appraisal, something in your own sense of self-worth that doesn't allow you to give the same generosity to yourself. So I want to make a lot of this make really clear sense to you so that you can see the connections. You can see what we operate out of. You can see how this self-idea I have that has this knowledge base that's based on all this experience, all the things I've done, all the mistakes I've made, all the people, my public opinion, who they think I am, who they think I should be. You can see how that begins to shape how you see yourself. And if it shapes how you see yourself, it shapes the value that you place upon yourself, okay? So what I want to get to is who are you really, right? Outside of all that experience, outside of all of every mistake, every flaw, all the history books, all the things you should have done, wish you hadn't done, all those things. And that's why, for me, this particular series is so critically important. It's going to set the stage for where we're going to go next, but it really is foundational material. So we went into some detail around self-image, and I thought, let's start there and let's go a little deeper, and let's pull some case studies that give us maybe a beautiful way of seeing a little deeper around self-image and what happens when it's distorted. So everybody knows the story of Moses, right? God decides, hey, look, I'm going to deliver the people. Their cries come to me and I'm ready to get involved, and I need you to go with me. I need you to hang out with me because we're going to go deliver them. And Moses has this, this kind of interesting reply, right? It just seems like if God comes along and says, hey, we're going to go deliver the children of Israel, like, you are with God, right? So what would be the thought of, oh no, we can't do this, right? Because literally you're with an infinite source of power and love and mercy and kindness and all that. But nonetheless, his conversation is, oh no, you can't be talking to me because I don't speak well. I'm slow of speech. My tongue gets a little caught up every now and then. I feel inadequate. Who's going to follow me? He says, like, who do you think is going to let me lead them? In other words, like literally his self-image was so distorted, like he could not see that he could actually be not just a leader, he could actually be a deliverer. So I want you to see that self-image keeps you from taking risk. It keeps you from stepping up. When our self-image is distorted, it keeps us from taking any chances. It keeps us from growing. It keeps us from evolving and developing. It keeps us from unlocking all of our potential and creating new possibility. When your image is distorted, you make a lot of excuses for why you can't do X and you won't do Y and that won't work. So you can hear, and maybe not even here, maybe you can relate to Moses, his distorted self-image, and because of that, he just couldn't see himself leading. He just couldn't see himself being a deliverer. But I want you to see that God doesn't just say, all right, whatever. You know what I mean? Literally, all the case studies I'm going to bring before you not only speak to the importance of each one of these facets of self-identity, but it speaks to the criticality of you understanding not just why they're important, but what they actually facilitate. So when our self-image is somehow flawed or distorted, there is no way we're going to perform at our best. There's no way we're going to take risks. There's no way we're going to step up. There's no way we're going to be growing and exhausting our potential. There's no way we're going to operate in possibility because we're going to be hiding someplace within ourselves, afraid, right? Hiding within ourselves, insecure, and believing that, no, this is not something I can do. So I want you to see how clearly in this situation, but God goes to work on Moses' sense of self. God goes to work on helping him self-realize, right? He begins telling him, but I made this, I made your mouth. And I mean, literally, he takes him through all of that. But I want you to begin to see that this idea of self-image, how you see yourself, I need you to see it maybe in a way you haven't really looked at it before. I want you to see how critically important it is it creates the ceiling for your life. You know, we talk about a glass ceiling in leadership, you know, but I want you to see that any ceiling that you are operating within is really self-perpetuated. It begins in the construct of how you see yourself. Remember, we're educated to our limitations. I know people educate us to what we cannot do. We're very seldom educated to what we can do. But I want you to see that this image, when it's distorted, makes it impossible for us to achieve and live at our best, to have a significant impact, right? To understand that my presence here should be incredibly impactful. So we see Moses' story, we see God get involved. So let's move to the next one, self-image. Well, I thought about, who's a great case study for this? It would be David. Because you have to know yourself in such a way that when other people don't know you, you don't wear the label of their ignorance about you. So for instance, the Bible says that David was taking lunch to his brothers when he overheard about Goliath and all the ranting and raving. But before that, we find that they were looking, right? They were looking for the Lord's anointed, and the Bible says that they overlooked him, right? That they just, do you have anybody else? Because literally the oil will not pour on any of the sons. And they were, the Bible says some of them were handsome and they were tall. But what I want you to hear is, in this sense, this self-knowledge, if David did not know who he was, he had a lot of opportunity to feel very different about himself. So what happens is, they move from there, and you know the story. He goes to deliver the lunch to his brothers, and his brother says, he says, I'm paraphrasing, "You snotty-nosed kid, you only came down here because you're nosy. You wanted to see the battle, and he literally calls him a kid, basically, in some ways, demeans his very presence, right? And literally, if he hadn't known who he was then, he'd had opportunity, turn around and head back. But he said, hey, what did he say? Right? Because he wants to know now, what is Goliath ranting and raving about? And then he gets all the way to the king, and the king says, you're going to go up against him? Well, you can't go like that. You're going to have to go in my armor. So in all these instances, whether it's the being looked over, or whether it's something as simple as siblings, right? Maybe not knowing who we are and making unfair judgments about us and assigning labels to us that do not apply. And then the king says, well, certainly if you're going to go into battle, you can't not go as you. Maybe you should wear my armor. There's all these opportunities around us for people to tell us who we are, right? And if David had not known who he was, he had many opportunities to relinquish his identity to somebody else's idea of him. Think about it. He could have believed what his brother said and went back home. Yeah, he was right. Or he could have believed what the king said, and he could have said, you know what? You're right. I can't go as me. I'm going to go in your armor. That means I'm going to go as you. But you know what happens when we're not sure of who we are? We wear all the assumptions. We wear all the labels. We let people apply all kind of identifications to us. We let people assign all kind of expectations to us because we don't know who we are. So we live in the stereotypes, we live in the assumptions, and we inherit and let them, just like hand-me-downs, we let people hand down to us all different levels of our sense of self. So can you see that in the story of David, how all these opportunities he had to agree with what people thought about him? That he's just a snotty-nosed kid, that you can't go up against Goliath. Have you seen yourself? Look, you're going to go with a what? A rock? Can you see all the opportunities he has to relinquish what he knows about himself for somebody else's opinion of himself? We do this all the time. But the instance is, we usually trade, right? We trade our sense of self for something that is not us, or we believe they know us better than we know ourselves. Remember, self-knowledge is going to affect how you see yourself, and how you see yourself is going to affect the value you place upon yourself. So this is not a small conversation. So we can see from the story that David has a lot of opportunity to move into a level of knowing about himself that maybe other people have that he doesn't. Well, he got a king, he got some siblings, he has his father didn't call him in. I mean, these are pretty big people, right? The king is an authority figure, the father is a parent, the brothers are people who are supposed to know us. But sometimes it's the people that are the closest to you that don't see you. I know that sounds crazy. They should see you. But it's the people closest to you that do not see you. They only see you through the lens of their own projection. So let's get to the last one. So we talked about the self-image. We talked about the self-knowledge. So is there somebody we can pull that really speaks to the absence of self-esteem, right? And I thought about this and I said, well, maybe we should think about the woman at the well, because, self-esteem is the fuel that moves us forward in life. Self-esteem is that lets me believe in myself. Like it's a big thing. It's not just I want to walk in a room and not feel invisible, because we really diminish self-esteem. That I just want to be confident when I walk in a room. Well, I love all that. But self-esteem is so much more than that. It's not how I enter a room and do people see me? Do I feel invisible? Do I feel visible? Do I feel seen? No, self-esteem is actual motivation. It is fuel. It is your internal fueling system to move you out into the things that you are uniquely designed and destined to do. So if I look at the woman at the well, I think it's an interesting piece, because clearly she's at the well in the heat of the day, right? Because I don't think she feels really good about herself, because she's hiding in plain sight, right? But she's going to the well the hottest part of the day, partly because she probably has a little bit of a reputation, right? She's on husband number 4, and she might feel as though people are judging her and all those kind of things. And, so what happens is Jesus meets this woman, and he meets her on purpose. And you got to love God, because God addresses all of these issues. What I love is no matter where you stand on the line, if Moses is who you identify with, if David is who you identify with, if Jacob is who you identify with, if the woman at the well is who you identify with, all of them are incredible places to begin to see that, man, we all struggle with the same issue. The pandemic is the same. We do not know who we are, and we struggle with ideas versus a true identity. We struggle with all of these labels rather than understanding our divine design. So when you look at the woman at the well, she has a very low self-esteem. And Jesus comes along and he begins, and the first thing she says is, "What do you want me to give you a drink? Do you know who I am?" I mean, listen to that. I can't give you any water. Do you know who I am? I mean, you can hear the self-debasing moment. I can't get you a drink. You don't have any dealings with us. You can hear the low value. The thing about when we are missing self-esteem, it's very difficult to advocate for yourself. It's very difficult to, in many ways, care for yourself. It's difficult to stand up to things that are maybe happening that shouldn't be happening to us, right? So self-esteem is that fuel that keeps moving us forward, but she clearly doesn't have that. You can hear the storyline, I can't give you any water, do you know who I am? And then, she tries to move the story to something really spiritual, literally you can hear her uncomfortability in all the dialogue, but she represents to me somebody who really lacks self-esteem. And what you find with people who lack self-esteem is they settle. They settle and they hide. Now I'm gonna let you think about that. Because settling and hiding are the same thing. We settle within ourselves at a place that's not who we really are. We settle within zones of life way beneath our privilege. We settle in places because somebody said that's the best you can be. That's the best you can do. So that's the same thing as hiding in plain sight, hoping that nobody sees us, right? Not willing to take a chance, not willing to step outside of, the place I am familiar, the place I am comfortable, even if it's small, even if it's confined, and we love to be hidden, and we love to settle when our self-esteem is low. So you can see that all of these three present unique challenges to us, right? Whether it's the distorted self-image that won't allow me to take risk, it won't allow me to, move through a setback really well. It just keeps me, playing way beneath my privilege, clearly. And then we can see from the lack of self-knowledge how easy it is to let somebody else assign labels to us, tell us what we have to be. And then we wear those labels because we're not sure of who we are. And then you can see from the self-esteem that when our self-esteem is low, we are hiding in plain sight, hoping nobody sees us. We're settling for just what is, with no thought of what is possible. So no matter where you step in the storyline, what you will see is, for me, the bedrock of this entire thing we call our existence. The reason you and I are here is to move into a level of self-realization. I love the story of the prodigal son because I think it is, for most of us, our life's journey. We start off looking for some level of who am I, what am I doing in the world, how do I fit here, by moving outward, right? We start that conversation by going outside, which means we look outside of ourselves for something to define us. And you know the story of the prodigal son. He goes and assigns himself, to a citizen of the country. He's really looking, right? He's searching for himself, but he does it outside of himself. And one of the most beautiful statements God makes is he says, I am that I am. That statement to me is very simple, but I'm going to give you Veronica's version. When God says, I am that I am, he is simply saying, I do not define myself by anything outside myself. I do not define myself by anything outside myself. So most of us, like the prodigal son, we move outside of ourselves to look for ourselves. And then he has this one moment of self-realization where what does he do? He comes to himself. That's what the Bible says. He comes to himself. That is the intention of this entire series, that you would come to yourself, not an idea of yourself, not an expectation of yourself, not somebody else's idea of you, but that you would come to yourself. See, it's not about becoming someone else. It's about discovering who you've always been. So he comes to himself, but watch what happens when he comes to himself. Where does he go? He returns home. So there's a journey, I believe, even in self-identifying, that takes us outside of ourselves. And then when we come to ourselves, we realize something profound, that not only am I, not only who I am, but it actually sends me back to the Father. So the journey begins in God to recognize who we are after we recognize what we're not. So remember I said the first thing is we have to begin with what we're not. And then we start to realize we come to ourselves. And when you come to yourself, it's so interesting that we just don't stop there. Knowing myself takes me into a deeper revelation of who God is. Now, why would that be? Because we were made in the image and likeness of God. So to know more about you, you have to know more about him. When you know more about him, you know more about you, right? So my entire intention for this episode, really clear, is that you would look at the unique challenges of each of the elements of self-identity. And you would see where distorted self-image, what that keeps you from. You would look at your self-knowledge and see where there's lack of self-knowledge. You're going to borrow everybody's opinion of you. You're going to wear the labels. Where there's low self-esteem, gosh, are you going to hide and you're going to settle. But I want you to see the implication and the consequence of these. These are big things. People spend decades stuck. So the idea is that you would understand the entire episode's intention is that you would come to yourself. Not another idea of yourself, but your true self. So your homework is simply to muse on that, right? I want you to think of it. I want you to meditate on it. I want you to contemplate on what it means to come to yourself. Listen, this has been a blast hanging out with you. I need you to stay with me while I complete the series. But in the meantime, I want you to do your due diligence. Just kind of muse. Sit with the thought of coming to yourself. Allow yourself time and space to just be alone with yourself and see what comes up. It's been incredible to be with you. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you next time at Sacred Significance. This has been your host, Dr. Veronica Cochran.